I am unashamed. What about you?
All right, we got big unashamed. We were right at history's door.
I was so excited.
We were so close.
I thought that we were going to have 8 people here. We were going to make history.
We had planned on 8.
I didn't know if 8 people had attempted a podcast.
Not in Unashamed Nation. Not. I don't even know that we've attempted 7, but we're attempting it today.
I was thinking bigger out of the history of the world. But Zach,
I'm sure one of
sent a representative, a much better representative.
Well, when you have an option between Zach and Jill Dasher, and you get Jill, we call that an upgrade. Jill, welcome.
That's right.
Welcome to Unashamed. We don't have Zach. Where is Zach? Tell us where Zach is.
Zach is currently on an airplane. Hopefully he'll make it safely
We
too.
pray for that.
I think he's going to LA for a few days, living the high life.
So he's a movie mogul now. He's doing documentaries, he's making movies, he's promoting, marketing. That's what he does now, right?
But he started with us, didn't he?
He did. If he were here, he would say, go to, what's this push? I don't even know. Do you know, Jill? Go to the blind something.
I should know this.
Yeah, I should know this.
TheBlindMovie.com.
TheBlindMovie.com. Is that what it is?
It's something like that.
I shouldn't have brought
you
it
Google
up.
the blind movie, you'll get there.
Yeah, you'll get there. So.
Yeah, I mean, they've been working on this for 7 years now. No,
It feels like it. It feels like it.
I know it feels like it. To you, Jill.
I think it's more like 50.
Well, Mom and Dad
movie.
Mom and Dad have
Yeah.
been working on it for 50 years. But it
More
is
like 64.
So, Mom, we've seen 2 clips, and what have you done at both clips?
I cried like a baby.
So we think it's going to be a tearjerker, right?
Well, everybody had tears
We did.
if they didn't lie. They did.
It's going to be good. So so Missy, Lisa, Mom, welcome. Jill, we have all the wives are here today. That was
I came prepared.
I could be wrong.
I wore a
I wish you'd
T-shirt
had that back
says,
in my day.
I could be wrong, so I did.
I would have bought that.
This
for
is
you.
my prep. The complete totality of my prep was putting this shirt on.
Dad, this is the homage to the Fox show Outnumbered, because today the men are outnumbered on Unashamed. We have 4 women, 3 men. What is
It's fallen victim to the culture. In our culture, females rule.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, I'm so tough.
So we actually, the reason we did this today is because of where we are in 1 Peter that we're going to be talking about. So I wanted to get a women's perspective. But before that, Missy, so you got to tell us, because we've been talking about you on recent podcasts.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Have
because
we?
I wouldn't know since I don't listen.
I know we don't.
Oh, babe, thanks for that rousing endorsement.
She used to listen, but then she got so tired of correcting Jace's stories that she had to quit listening.
Well, he's coined me the story police.
The story,
I said,
please.
you know what? I just won't listen anymore.
So now I want
Our
to.
compromise.
We will now be using a little slogan at the bottom of the podcast for you viewers, that every time I talk and tell a story, they're going to put based on a true story.
That would be better.
Okay.
That would be
Push that
better.
through. They're all scrambling around wondering how to make that happen.
Alex,
Or
make
you
that
can
happen.
just open your shirt after the end of every story that you tell.
That's why I wore the shirt, babe.
He does reference that quite often.
Well, I wish I'd have had one of those when he was growing up.
The Lord has softened me, Kay.
Oh, I know. I've seen it.
Thank
You should, if he was going to get a tattoo, Mom, that could be the tattoo. That could be.
I don't
No.
know, but if I said this, he said that. And if I said this, he said that. No, you did. Sorry.
If you see me getting a tattoo, I'm dead. I don't mind if y'all want to do that after I die. Just for
I'm gonna do it then. If you die first, he was wrong. I'll just do that. Forget about it. Could be right. He was wrong. Right there on the arm. So Missy, you went to Spain because we talked about it on the podcast. We did some of your jelly on the podcast. I wasn't in town, but I watched from afar. We tried some of your jelly, which was excellent.
I ate it too.
I thought this one, I didn't go looking for souvenirs, but once I tasted that, I thought I'm going to take a risk and buy that jar for Phil because to me it tasted so good.
Mm-hmm.
And it was tart, and I know he likes that because of the Mayhaws. You like the Mayhaws and the slow and all that. Said, I'm fixing to take a big risk here and buy that for Phil, and who knows if he'll like it or not, but I'm sure I'll hear about it either way.
We had a nice discussion about
He
it.
gave it a neutral rating, which in the overall grand scheme, that's a win.
I thought it was delicious.
Well,
I did
good.
too.
I ate some yesterday.
Yeah, I thought it was.
It opened up some dialogue about our Scottish roots, which I thought was really interesting and good. So you were in Spain, and your daughter-in-law had your grandson.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that story.
So Jace's best friend Barrett, who I know he's talked about many times on the podcast, his wife and I went to Spain. And because just worked out, we had a lot of points on our credit card and just some really great circumstances worked out where we went, and we got to stay in this little apartment in a neighborhood. So off the beaten path, not in the touristy part. And we really got to experience some of the Spanish Catalonia culture. And it was amazing. But some of the stuff that we did to her, I learned a lot about who, when we say, ooh, that's gaudy, like in terms of design. There is a man, his name was Gaudi. That's where we get that. And his design is kind of out there, but he was a very spiritual man. And a lot of that over there is Catholicism, and they hold Mary to a certain regard. And he was all about Jesus. And some of the stuff he wrote, like on his cathedrals and things, were amazing, but he would build them so high. There was one that was just crazy looking, but he said that man should never outdo what God has done. So he did not build anything above whatever mountain was in the area. Which I thought was really amazing.
Yeah.
So there was some really amazing Christian history and culture that we were able to learn and experience. And
Apparently the Almighty has given you a thumbs up.
is that thunder?
Whoa.
What is that?
I don't know.
Maybe God is speaking right now. But anyway, so that's we went there. We just feel like duck season for our husbands is very intense.
Well, it's getting hot in here.
It can be tense in our homes come January. So we were on a little tour one day, and we were with some other Americans, and they were like, so, how do y'all know each other? And we told them, and they said, so do y'all do this every year? And I looked at Shannon, and I said, yep, starting now. We're doing this every year. We're going to do some kind of a trip to get away, because I do think it's important to be fresh and positive for our husbands when they are very stressed and tired because of duck season and all that. That brings.
And you threw in a production of a TV show.
Well, yeah, that too.
By the way.
And my grandbaby was born while I was there.
Well, yeah.
So, there was a lot of things going on. Of course, he came early. That was not the plan.
Right.
But little David Silas Robertson was born a couple of days before our trip ended, and he's perfect and beautiful and healthy and all is well. So that was exciting.
If you're keeping score, Si, when he named me, when you was out on the river catching fish, I named Reed, or we named Reed after me, and then now we're continuing the legacy, which is kind of scary when you.
Silas, yeah.
I like it.
Well, when you look at the original person behind that, it's a little scary, but I think worth leaving a legacy.
Yeah.
I think, we were talking about it in our compound text chain, and I said it'll be a fourth generation of, I was trying to think of the term I used. I was trying to think of the BS, I think.
Storytelling?
Storyteller. There you go. Trying to think of a sanitized version that I used. Jill, give us an upgrade on what your life is like, because Mia and Leah are...
Layla.
Mia and Leah. Mia and Leah are roommates. Tell us about what's life in the Black Mountain Fast Lane. What's going on with you guys?
So
catch the audience.
Layla moved to Nashville, and she's going to Lipscomb, and her and Mia are roommates. And I told Missy, I said, they need a podcast because their stories are hilarious every day. The other day, I laughed so hard because Layla's been sick, and so she's snoring at night, and she's just been so congested. And she said Mia finally got up in the middle of the night and was like, Layla, stop. And of course, Mia just like, and so the Layla telling the story, I just love it. I think it's such a blessing that family can, be close like that. They were born just a couple of weeks apart. They had birthdays together growing up. So it's just really cool. And then the rest of the gang we're in Black Mountain, and we're just holding the fort down, taking care of babies. We have another foster child right now. So we've got an addition.
Shocker.
And he's absolutely precious. But it's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, Jill's she's the old woman who lived in the shoe.
Mm-hmm. How's our baby Ruth?
I think that would have impacted me more if they'd had an audio on it.
What?
If I could have heard her. Sometimes when you're not heard, I've learned the old lesson, just let it ride.
Dad does
that
a lot, doesn't he, Mom?
Yeah, he does.
He just sits over there and not hears you quite often.
All the time, but he nods his head like he
nods
does.
like
The older
he's
you
listening.
get, the
He's
less
not-
you can hear.
The say what's get more rare the older you get, where they never have to say what? No.
It's not worth
You-
it.
You just say, "Oh well."
Yeah.
Dad finds
Let it
himself
ride.
not clarifying anymore. It's just like,
Let it
yeah,
ride.
that's fine. I don't need clarity.
I mean, maybe we just need, the older you get, like mandatory lip reading classes. Because it is.
Clarity.
Yeah, it is a problem.
You've been around people where they pick every little thing, and unless it's their way, they're just mouthing about it all the time, whatever it may be.
I tend to drown that out.
There you go. I
I
just
told you I
learned.
learned that skill where I can sleep with my eyes open. So if it's too nonsensical, I just take a nap.
Oh,
We're
that
learning a lot
sounds
about
like it.
relationships here.
Yeah. I'm glad none of y'all's wives are like that, though.
Phil said I cackle like a chicken.
Are you a cackler, Mom?
Yeah, I am. I just carry on. And he acts like he hears me anyway.
And that's all you need, isn't it?
That's right. Acknowledged by some way, nodding. He ain't heard a word, but he's nodding. Yep.
Mom
Kind of with the meaning like, I'm ready for you to be quiet now.
It's kind of like when you talk with Mom on the phone. As long as you just give an occasional
I'm not sure she requires that on the phone.
Well, she just wants to make sure the call hadn't dropped. That's all she needs.
I said, last time I talked to you, I said, Alan, are you there?
Are you still there? Mm-hmm. just an occasional.
I feel like we should go around and tell how long we've all been married.
We should. Let's take a break first. So thanks to you guys and your support, Patriot Mobile has emerged as one of the leaders in the parallel economy, and they've got big news. They now offer service with all three major networks. This means that if you're with the big three and like the service, but you hate their values, which most of us do, you can access them with Patriot Mobile. They also offer a performance guarantee, so if you're not happy with your coverage, you can switch between the three major carriers for free. Excellent. Patriot Mobile, remember, is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They offer nationwide coverage on the best 4G and 5G networks. So you get the same great service while supporting a company that fights to preserve your God-given rights, your freedoms. They support right to life. They support a lot of the things that we support, Second Amendment. This new year, resolved to stop supporting companies that don't align with your values. Their 100% U.S.-based customer support team makes switching easy. Just go to patriotmobile.com/Phil, or you can call them at 878-PATRIOT. Get free activation today with the offer code PHIL. That's patriotmobile.com/Phil, or you can call them at 878-PATRIOT. That's patriotmobile.com/Phil, or call them at 878-PATRIOT. All right, you want to start, Dad?
We're going on 33 here.
Wow. Good
Whoa.
job, babe.
That seems, Jay,
well,
just from I remember when you dated, You're now wife. That seemed like that quick. 33 years?
That's where we're headed.
Most, yeah.
I wouldn't have recommended we go around till
Now, her
how long we've
parents
been
did
married if I hadn't thought about that.
her
baby.
parents did not recommend you as her husband.
Not at first.
You were of low recommendation. No.
Wait, hold on just a second.
Did they take a stance that just it's not going to happen, or was it
No,
kind of like,
it's because of my age. We were young. It's not that they rejected him. They did not like the time frame because I was the ripe old age of 17 when we were engaged.
this
That's
is her
the problem.
positive
That was
spin
their
on it.
problem. With
Yeah, I
it.
never thought
All
about
I
it. that
heard
way.
was no.
Which when I
But
think
the
about
parents were saying no, but Missy was saying, "Give it some time. It'll work out." But is that the kind
She
of way it
was
went?
more like maybe.
no.
Well, yeah, she was like yes, but like
Well, if you think about this, like Layla and Mia are both 19. They're 2 years older than what I was when we were engaged. What if Mia
That's
came
scary.
home now and said, I'm about to be
Well,
proposed to?
it would depend on the fella. If it was someone like me, I would say okay.
What about 2 years ago? What about 2 years ago?
Babe, let's not do that.
So how old were y'all when y'all got married, Missy?
I was 19, and he was.
I was 20. I was
6 days from being 21. So
Yep. We were young.
we were young.
What about y'all? With Jill, how long y'all been married?
This June will be 23 years of marriage. 23 or 22? Shoot, I can't remember. One of the two. I know we
What
made it to
year
20.
was it?
And I always thought if you make it to 20 years, because, man, there were a lot of years where I just was crossing my fingers.
Yeah.
But we got married young. I was 20. I had just turned 20. And Zach was 23. So,
Yeah,
Well, y'all were old. Wow.
well, I mean, in Louisiana years, yeah, we were ancient getting married. But what's funny is I lived in North Carolina at the time, and none of my friends were even talking about marriage. So everyone thought I was crazy getting married at 20. But it's funny how different states have different cultures. And so, yeah.
Mom?
Oh, well, here's the way I have to tell it.
Insert.
Get your shirt
Get
ready,
the
babe.
based on a true story ready.
Well, here's the way I put mine. We've been together, dating and married, for 64 years.
Good. 64. That's a
And
lot.
we fell in.
It is worth interjecting just to help answer the question. One of the things that came up is I was a senior in high school, and she was a junior in high school. She was in the 11th grade, and I was in the 12th grade. So I'm fixing to graduate from high school, take off to some university on a football scholarship. I got scholarships offered from most of the universities. So when it finally came down, I'm going to Louisiana Tech, I told her that. I said, I'm heading to Tech. You're a junior in high school, Stuck it up. I said, well, she said, well, wait a minute here. Oh, you think I'm not going with you? I said, well, you better, if your mama has a problem with you, you might ought to run it by her because I'm fixing to leave. If you want to go with me, let's go. So she said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So that in some family structures that would be a problem.
You think?
You're right.
I can't imagine that not working out for most people.
It's just normal, right?
Well, we need some counseling.
So what did your mama ever give an answer when you said, oh, here's what's fixing to
Well,
happen?
Yeah, how'd that go down, Mom?
Well, see, my mama was dating at the same time as me because I lost my daddy when I was 14 years old to a heart attack. And she was young. And so it just so happened that we're dating at the same time. And I think she was happy because she could go on with her, dating. Yes. And so she wasn't afraid. My grandmother's the one that helped me through everything, though. I mean, she had taught me so much growing up to always be one man and one woman for one life. And I said, but some people get divorced. And she said, you'll never use that word. You won't need to. You're just never. She said, that's why you have to fight for your marriage. And I said, why would I have to fight for my marriage? And she said, because Satan wants to destroy all marriages. And he'll come after you.
Plus, it's worth mentioning, I guess, you know the truth will set you free, that during that time we were a little bit slow on actually going and getting their marriage license.
Took a while.
Sign the dotted line. For how long? A couple of years?
Well, it was before Jason was born, I know that.
It was, yeah.
That was the most important.
It was about 4 years after that. So it wasn't quite the clean line of most couples. You know, in fact, this is just, I'm throwing this out here as a suggestion, but y'all's lives were so unique and different, you could make a movie about how unique and different it was.
I've been saying that for years.
You can call it The Blind.
Yeah, I was, like the justice of the peace where you go, where they just say, okay, you have to go through the formality sign right here. We walked in there, Miss Kay was out $10 on the blood. They gave you, state of Oklahoma, that's where we went, Idabel, Oklahoma. They take a blood test, see if you got any, diseases, I guess. But then they send you right down the road, and the guy said, you want her? I said, yeah. He said, sign right here.
Well, he said a little.
I mean, it was a short wedding ceremony. I signed the thing, and he said, that'd be $15, and I was like, 15? Miss Kay, you got any?
I always had the money.
Yeah.
You didn't have any money.
She went through a little billfold, came up with the $15, and it was a short wedding, less than a minute.
We found out it was actually in April of '68, I think was the official time. So 55 years.
The main thing was before Jason was born. That's what I wanted to.
It was before Jason was born, which we're glad.
Oh, I appreciate that.
It was slow.
Listening to y'all share your story, I'm thinking about the movie because it's been our life for the last couple of years, and just y'all talking and sharing that little part. I'm just imagining the scenes in the movie that are depicting some of that, and I would just cry all over again. It's just it's so touching. I cannot wait. I just can't wait for everybody to get to see that.
Well, bring your tissue.
Oh yeah,
you come to
for
see
sure.
it.
So Lisa and I this will be 39 for us this year. And,
39.
39 years. Yep. We're approaching 40 for us as well. And, it's been some rocky roads, but God has seen us through as well. So we've had the privilege of working with a lot of marriages that have had difficulties because God has seen us through some stuff as well. So, and I think that's the beauty of where we are on this text, because we're in 1 Peter 3, which is where we're going to be studying, which is why I want to have the wives, I want to hear their voices. One is because, obviously you get to hear us pontificate on scriptures because we've taught, the text and the Bible for many, many years, but our wives have as well. You don't do what we've done in terms of shepherding people and discipling people and teaching people without your wives being a part of that process. And every group we've had, every, all the things we've done through the years, we've done that together as couples. And from the beginning, every one of us have. And so that process has been something is a shared thing we've done together. So let's take a break. And on the other side of that break, I'll kind of set up what we've been talking about, and then we'll get into this text. So this whole thing has been about submission ever since we got to chapter 2, because if you look back, and it's funny, Missy, you talked about when you're on your trip to Spain, the idea about the buildings with the Gaudi, which was interesting because Peter uses a metaphor about us being built into this spiritual building. And we talked about the idea of comparing that to a temple before, because that's what he uses as that example, except now, of course, we are the temple, and we are the one that offer the sacrifices because that's our lives. That's who we are. But he's talked about submission to God, submission to the government and the governing authorities who are there. He talked about submission to even those who they were in this indentured servitude to, in slavery was the word they used, but it's a lot different than slavery in the modern era. And even submission to Christ's example as he submitted himself into death. And so we've talked about all that up to now. And so we get to chapter 3, and it's interesting because he's going to shift it into a family setting, but he says in the same way. So the concept is the same as everything he's been talking about up to now, and that is the same way you submit to God is how we now submit in relationship. So I just want to set that context going forward as we're going to talk about this. And I want to read the text, and then I want to just kind of dive into a discussion. And Jill, I did want to mention, Jill, which I'm so glad you're in this discussion, because you actually wrote a book called Shallow, which deals a lot with what this text is dealing with, about women and how they look and how they're viewed and how that affects how they project themselves and how people look at them. So I want to talk about all that as well as we talk about this. So let me just read this text, and then we'll start breaking it down. This is 1 Peter 3. Wives, in the same way, and again, that's back to what we've been talking about in chapter 2, be submissive to your husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. Verse 2, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as braided hair and the wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to make themselves beautiful. They were submissive to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her master. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. Verse 7, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And I want to read this next little section because I think it kind of ties in as he expands a little bit further. He says, finally, all of you, that is the expansion, live in harmony with one another, be sympathetic, love as brothers, be compassionate, humble, do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from deceitful speech. He must turn from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his eyes are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. So long text, but starts out with this idea of first wives, then husbands. But it's interesting because the idea is still about having an impact to win people, which I thought was interesting. And he's talked about that throughout this whole idea. Somehow the response of your life is to win over someone else who doesn't know Jesus. And even he talks about that in a marriage context. So give me your initial take on this text, on the idea of this, because people look at this and obviously, our culture looks at something like this and obviously they're like, what are you talking about? This is insane.
Yeah.
This sets women back. This is a reason why, I would never be a believer, whatever, so give me your hot take.
Well, that's one thing. And a lot of religions have contributed to that being appalled by the world because they've, in my opinion, had some terrible teachings come out of this, even in the church. And so maybe that's why we all got together. It's a difficult passage to talk about, but it's really, when you look at Jesus as the example, even because I know we're going to go to Ephesians 5, I mean, we're both called to be like Jesus. That's what's so beautiful about marriage. But, even the headship of Jesus was about service, being a servant. And so when you get all the way down to how this applies in marriage, this having this submissive spirit, which is the reason I think he brought it up here, is going to go both ways. We just have different roles. And not unlike the Trinity, I think marriage is a very good way to show how you can be equal and have different ways to, work in that. I mean, it's hard to explain, but I think that's really what it is. I think there's a reason Jesus' first miracle was at a wedding, and it was a sign, and it seems insignificant because it's just over something, something being to save from public embarrassment, I guess. But I really think it was a vision and a prequel to what that marriage represents. We're all the bridegroom of Christ, but we're also all sons of God. So it's like he's using that analogy, and I think that's where you get the closest to understanding who Jesus is in marriage, because you both have an opportunity to live like Jesus. That's my take.
I think, too, what I was thinking about when I read this is I think it's one of those scriptures, we tend to handle with like ease, or we think, ooh, we're talking about the submission scripture, And I honestly think if we understood submission the way it was meant to be understood through a biblical perspective, it wouldn't be this like, submission. I think our culture has taken the word submission and we've deemed it to have this negative view. Like it's a submission, like it's a bad word. And when I think about Christ and his kingdom, everything is upside down. And so in the upside down kingdom of Christ, submission is a beautiful word. Like when it's in the context of the way God designed it, it's actually beautiful from both parts. And so I think why we have this tension is because we just believe we're drawn to what the culture is telling us. Submission is bad. Service is, you're less than. And Christ is the opposite. To serve is where the joy is at. It's where you're actually more fulfilled. And so I think I'm constantly, as a woman that is living in my flesh and continually battling against my flesh, I'm reminding myself, Jill, you serve an upside down kingdom. Like whatever the world is telling you, pretty sure God's word is the opposite. So just keep that in mind. That's what I thought about, just in light of that word submission.
Well, I think about the analogy sometimes that Jace uses. When we come to Christ, we have to submit ourselves to Christ. And he says, this is the only time where when you raise the white flag and surrender, you're winning. You win. And again, that's the upside down Christ, right? That's the upside down kingdom, because none of that makes any sense to anybody outside of Christ. And if anyone thinks that the policy that we're trying to set on the podcast today is submit to your husband because it's the right thing to do, it's submitting to Christ. And so when you do that, that's what you're called to do then is submit to your husband. It makes it so much easier. If you try to submit to your husband first before you submit to Christ, that will never work, because then you're just going to be feeling like you're losing a battle all of the time. You're going to feel like the loser. But if you submit to Christ, then you're winning every time. And I think, too, let's remember the context, too, of what Peter's talking about is an unbelieving husband. So except for Kay in the early years, we haven't had that. I haven't had an unbelieving husband. This context is very different for our lives than it is for someone else's life.
It's much more difficult if your husband has not fallen at the knees to Jesus. If he's still rebellious toward Jesus, you're going to be some flack there.
That's tough. That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Which I think is really the underlying point, because all the other illustrations he uses are submission in a setting that are not conducive to submitting. In other words, you're under an oppressive government, right? I mean, everything they were under in this scattered situation under Rome and all this was bad, right? You're under a situation where your master, and I put that in quotations, but whoever is over you is treating you badly. Remember, he said, you're going to take a beating, take one for do the right thing. Yeah. So every setting is a bad situation. Here in your situation, you're married to an unbeliever, and he's asking you to still treat them in a good way in spite of them not being good to you. So it's like every situation he's bringing up is like, look, you're suffering, but still you're God's daughter, in this situation. So that seems to be what his point is even in a bad situation, you're really submitting to Christ, which is your point, more than you're submitting to this person, but you're trying to win them is the point.
And also Peter, again, I know Jace talks about The Chosen, but I watch it multiple times, and I think it's so good to understand the portrayal that Dallas Jenkins and they have about Peter himself and who Peter is, and watching kind of his and his wife's on the show, their relationship and how they work together. But in, the first season when Jesus first calls Peter, and that's taken from John, where Peter, just falls on his face in submission, like Jesus says, follow me. And he, just pulled in all the fish that was not there. It came out of nowhere. And he realizes who this man is. He's the Messiah. And he submits to Christ. But yet, over the next 3 years of their relationship, and then even later when he's writing all of this, it's still hard. It's still like you have to daily remind yourself to keep submitting to Christ because of all of the circumstances around in your life. They're hard. Life is hard. And you forget sometimes to keep putting Christ first. And so you have to daily remind yourself, because if you just go from that one day when you came to Christ and everything was perfect and your heart was clean and pure, if you could have that forever, then life wouldn't be hard. But it's a daily reminder. And so I think that's also where Peter comes in and reminds us all, you've still got to keep working at it. It's still a struggle.
Well, I think you got to remember too that we're both supposed to, as husband and wives, we're both submitting to God first. And then wives submit to their husbands. One, I think, out of reverence to God. We submit to our husbands out of reverence to our Lord. Two, we do it out of respect for our husbands. Three, we do it to lead other people to Christ. Mm-hmm. We got to think about what other people are looking at. Our children, for one, people who are in the world, also other people that we associate with, people at church, people we're trying to help in their own marriage. There are so many reasons why we do what we do. Now, submission looks different for everybody, I think. And just the things we do every day, we submit. You take dirty underwear and wash them, you're submitting because, you just got to think about what you're doing every day. You wash clothes, you clean the house, you cook the food. All of this is submission. Mm-hmm. But then, your husband comes in and says, don't spend, more than $25. We only have, $30 in the account and you need to spend, $27. Okay, well then what am I supposed to do? Well, then you can only spend $25. So that makes it harder, So then you got to think about then you got to go, okay, this is that submission thing again. This goes back to, okay, Lord, how am I supposed to do this?
What Jay said too is like, we're partners. So we're past, thank goodness, after being married for 32 plus years, we're past the game playing. We're past your role is that, and I'm, you have to do that, and I have to do this. Those were hard years.
Yeah.
And I would not want to relive those again. We're past that, but now it's like we are partners in it, where we see like he does a lot of his own laundry.
Yeah.
And that was one of those boxes that as a man, he was told not to do that. That was the woman's job. I don't know where that verse is, but it must be in there somewhere because that's what we were told.
I think it's in Second Opinions.
Yeah. So,
Al is not allowed in the laundry room.
I've been
banned. We all have different, perspectives. But having the role that the Lord placed on us during Duck Dynasty, it limited my ability to pull off everything that I was supposed to pull off as the woman's role. So Jason one time walked in and said, well, I guess if anybody's going to wash clothes around here, it's going to be me. I said, I guess so. Because there was a lot of dirty clothes and I didn't have time to do it, you know? And so he started washing his own clothes. However,
Was he wearing an I Could Be Wrong t-shirt?
not yet.
I like washing clothes.
Yeah. So now, but you know, what I'm trying to get to is that was not something like we had to I wasn't not submitting.
Right.
He said, I got to help out around here.
Yeah.
We had gotten to the point in our marriage where he's like, I got to help out around here to get it done. Now, folding them and putting them away, he still does not do. But
Oh, now wait a minute here.
but
now,
no.
Hang on, this is a perfect time for a break.
Okay.
Now, I did wash the clothes, but I did not like the custom of getting everything. I'm like, it's my clothes. I'm going to wear them. I'm going to put them in a pile somewhere.
I remember that.
No, I still do that.
Still does that.
It's my clothes. I put them in a pile. I don't want them folded neatly. To me, that's a waste of time. I want to be able to look at it in a pile and pick something out. They're clean.
He's against folding.
I'm against
Well,
folding.
he's against folding and putting them away.
up.
But he's not against trying to find them. So he's trying, they're wrinkled. He's trying, I want that one shirt, which they're all this color, it seems like these days.
Yeah.
So he's trying to find the one he wants. So my
Well,
point is.
you put this on the top of the T-shirt.
I
You
did
folded.
not.
Yeah, it was on the top.
Well, that was not purposefully.
Oh, okay. I guess she wants me to wear this today.
Let me finish my point.
All right, babe, go.
My point is, I walk in from being gone or whatever, and all his clothes are all over the sofa in our living room. And I thought, I want to help my husband. So I'm going to organize it. I'm going to fold it. I'm going to put it away. So then when he walks in the closet, he can pull the shirt off the top of the pile, and it's not wrinkling clean. And I think that's is part of submission when I feel like there's a need in his life and I can fulfill it.
Right.
You're really
I'll do
good
it.
at that, babe. I will admit, you're really good at that. You do things like that. What I was going to say is I didn't have that transformation. I mean, one, just being married, you bring a certain amount of baggage to the relationship in the way you were raised and just your culture or what part of the country you're from. But the more I read the Bible, really, that's what the light bulb went on about. When I read my role in Ephesians 5, it's you're just not going to get something, some kind of authority abuse or dominance or, a poor attitude towards your wife when you read, the husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. Like, well, wait a minute here. We're all familiar with it. He died. He literally gave his life. All the verses about I didn't come here to be served. I came to serve, to make her holy by washing her with water through the word. I mean, this beautiful, this beautiful parallel of and metaphor, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. I mean, it's a spiritual thing. You're trying to do everything you can to present your wife in this way. And you ought to love your wife as your own body. He who loves his wife loves himself. So when you really look at this, that's why I said you both have opportunity to really share the gospel in your marriage. And that's why when people see that,
people are impressed by good, strong marriages. They're impressed. They say, "How'd you do that?"
When you see a woman with a submissive spirit and a husband who's serving, and they're both doing it for a greater good, it's just something about that that's impressive. And it was God's idea, and it I do think it mirrors the image of what the kingdom represents of us all being married to Christ, which is really what Galatians 3 is all about. So. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing. It was God's idea. And once you kind of understand that this is bigger than folding clothes, and I mean, that's where we all go to. But really, those are just little things that are opportunities to serve. And the greater thing is you're providing something that's great for the public, just the dynamic in the culture of having functional marriages like this, because it's better for your kids. It's better for society. I mean, you look at all the stats, people who are married and enjoy it, I mean, they make more money. They have more stable families. Their kid, with two, I mean, you just go look at the stats. It's out there. If you can pull it off, it's a better way to live. So, that just proves to me that God knows what he's doing.
Well, and even if you're in a public setting, not even a church setting, but you're in a public setting and someone says, hey, somebody's here's been married, 47 years, and they have them stand up, everybody cheers. Yeah. Like, everybody acknowledges that it's a good thing when people are married a long time. They don't even know whether they've had a good marriage, bad marriage, but hey, they've been married.
Probably pretty good if it lasted 47
Well, that's exactly
years.
right. People acknowledge that it's probably a good thing when people have stayed together for a long time. And so even people that don't even understand that. So, but you bring up a good point, Jace, and Miss, you did earlier when you said you have to learn, because we got a lot of young couples that are listening to our podcast, and a lot of people just entering marriage. So you learn these things over time. I mean, and you do have to go through the early years, right, Jill? I mean, you have to go through the early years. You mentioned that some of the early years, I mean, it's a struggle to figure some of these things out, right? Speak to that a little bit, Jill.
I loved what Missy said when she was first starting her analogy, and she was talking about how, she had this list. This was what Jason was supposed to do. This is what I was supposed to do. And I think that our nature is to just divide all of okay, this is your job. This is your job. This is your job. And as I was listening to you guys talk, the overarching theme is basically we started coming together. We quit trying to separate everything out. Okay, this behavior modification, I forget what that book was. I'm not going to name it, but it was all husbands do this and your wife will be happy. Wives do this, your husband will be happy. And I just think that's a flawed way to view. I just think God is always about coming together, and you guys figuring that out over the years. And one of the things I was out is because I was thinking, I bet there are a lot of, newly married people watching this, or young married, or people that have been married for a long time and have husbands that aren't believers. And I did want to back up just a little bit to that scripture that's, that they may be won over without a word by the behavior of their wives. And I thought, well, how do you win them over if you don't talk to them? And so I just wanted to speak a little bit into that scripture. I don't think he's saying, wives, you don't talk to your husband. I think it's more of a message of, wives, your husband is going to see Christ in you more through what you do than what you say. It's similar to how we raise our kids. I mean, I can tell my kids all day long, be like this, or do this, or don't do this, but they're watching what I do. They're watching me. That's how they're formulating their, it's way less about what I say. And I think that scripture, if you are watching this and you have an unbelieving husband, I think just the nagging and the, you need, or you've got to believe, or you've got to read your Bible more, or pray, all of that just, I think, kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But you just loving them in a way that Christ has loved you, and grace being something that flows openly throughout your marriage, that's going to have lasting impact on your spouse, rather than just, that kind of thing.
No,
well put.
No, that's good.
I do think, if you're single and you're like, well, I'm out on this discussion. I mean, ultimately, we're all the bridegroom of Christ, and I go back to that John 2. I mean, there's a reason, that was put in there that way. That the kingdom is really the feast of the Lord. It's being a part of that party, if you will, for eternity. And guess what? We're still married to Jesus, and Jesus is still single, and he's still in his body. So, because I've had people, young men, come to me and they're like, this is just too hard. I mean, why would God create me this way? Because they're single and they're not married. I have all these impulses. I'm like, well, Jesus has been single for about 2000 and whatever something year. So he's still that way. And so there's no sense, blaming God. Why did he make me this way? And we have plenty of passages in here, where it says it's better, which I used that on your father-in-law when he said no. I said, well, it's better to marry than to burn with passion.
I don't recommend saying that.
Terrible thing to say in the moment, but I was angry. I was mad. But guess what? I think having this servant-like attitude is really key, because what you're going to find is just like cooking, I think. If nobody ever criticizes the cooking, you could possibly eat terrible food the rest of your life. And marriage is all about,
The word would be more instead of bad-minded, is critique it.
Well, yeah.
You critique, but when famous chefs get together, 10 of them cook the same type roast.
Yeah.
And then they vote on it and they say yours is the best.
Yeah.
They come together as a group saying, he makes the best roast. How did you do that? He gives them the recipe until next month. We'll meet them, do another one.
But my point was, unless you have this humble attitude and servant spirit, which is really the two ways we can share Jesus with our roles that God designed, you can't take criticism, nor can you give it. Only in there can you, receive that, and which, look, holding each other accountable and having these difficult conversations, that is what makes us better. But ultimately, it gives you a foundation for forgiveness, which we haven't talked about. But we all mess up. We're humans. We have to live together, seeing each other at our best and our worst,
which we will talk about more. We'll talk about some of that in the overtime. I want to make some comparisons to the Ephesians text, to the Peter text, because they are quite different, even though some of the themes are the same. So we'll do some of that in our overtime, as well as we're going to hold the ladies over for our next podcast as well, because we didn't even get into some of the other things in the text that I think Jill can help us with about some of the adornment issues and some of those as well. So come see us in our overtime. That's blazetv.com/unashamed if you want to sign up for that and hear more from the Unashamed wives, which is always good.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.